Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
Chapter 15, Loving a Loving God. Before we look at the material that I sent out, that I assume you all got, because I know some of you reported that you did, and a couple of students told me that they can't come today. We'll see them next week, which is our last meeting. Do you have any observations, questions, comments that you want to introduce?
Well, the only comment I could make is that from what we read, the Torah loves us and we have to love the Torah back to make things basically equal. And I felt that was what the whole chapter was about.
In a sense, you're right. I mean, the Torah is, yes, it is the vehicle that's I guess shapes how we love back.
It doesn't say actually that God doesn't love other people. It's just that He picked our people.
Right. Well, that was laid out.
Love.
Yeah, that was laid out earlier in the book. Then that has got to keep that in mind.
But they brought it up again in this chapter.
Yeah, just briefly.
To remind us that
briefly.
Just because He loves us doesn't mean He doesn't love the others, but we're special.
Right. Yes, I mean, in the fact that when picking up on Soloveitchik, the whole notion that actually we can be a vehicle for sharing God's love with the rest of humankind, because they can appreciate, from us, and in a certain sense, we'll talk about that in greater depth. That Buber, in a sense, not in the same way, no, a little bit different. Anyway, yeah. Right. So the whole thing, yes, I mean, the love of Israel has to be seen as an element that is a significant element that is part of an overall love of God for all of God's creatures, in fact. And that is supposed to shape our reactions to the rest of the creatures in the world as well. Bert.
Yeah, I would say also, the Torah is our story.
Yes.
And so it's not surprising that we and God are the center of it.
Yes.
I don't think it pretends to be the story of everybody and every people everywhere. And I do think it's going to be fascinating at some point when we find life on other planets or even in other universes, how that is going to affect how we look at Torah.
Yeah. Well, Hashamayim Mesaprim Kavod El. The heavens speak the glory of God, right? So the glory of God is recognized by the movement of the stars. In other words, the nature itself recognizes God. And therefore, should we meet these aliens, and for all we know, they're here. You could there may be 10 million sitting right next to you right now.
I thought I saw them at a political convention about a month ago.
What about this week?
I could be wrong.
Thank you.
I could be wrong.
Anyway.
I would just like to add to what Bert said, but the Christians actually are part of the Torah too, because they all stemmed later after Torah when Jesus was born.
Who is this? The who?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Oh, yes. Well, look, Jesus was a Jew.
Exactly. So I'm saying that the Christians are included in this. Yes, the Muslims and the
Muslims are too. I think I said it before.
Yeah, we're related.
In the Quran,
mm-hmm.
After references to Muhammad, and by the way, his name is mentioned, I think, only 4 times.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, he's called the prophet, the teacher. There are all kinds of other terms for him. But after that, which we would expect would be the dominant voice, is Musa.
Moses is mentioned, I think, more than any other human being.
Yes, 150 people 150 times exactly, except, I would say, after Muhammad, it's Musa. And Muhammad is essentially saying that what he is teaching is the correct version of the teachings of Musa. Okay, that's where we have a big difference between them, right? But that's their belief, okay? And there's some subtle references to Ezra, who screwed things up when he started to write everything down. Because remember, it was under Ezra that we read of the formal reading of the Torah publicly. So the assumption was, and many Bible scholars say that it may actually be approximately correct, that it was by that time in the middle of the 5th century that the various versions of the traditions wrapped up into the 5 books of Moses was completed. It's hard to prove that, but they say that within the teachings of Ezra and Nehemiah and how they express things, that they seem to be aware of the traditions of all previous versions of the messages from God. So that's why they think that maybe it may have been around that time. And remember, Ezra's a scribe, right? Scribes were the ones who were writing it, probably did all of this redaction. Ezra is a Kohen. He's a priest. He wasn't an active priest, but he's a Kohen. And it's very likely that Kohanim and Leviim were involved in the redaction process also. But we don't know for sure. All right, anyway. So, yes, God's love extends out to all of creation. All of creation. Okay, anybody else comment on this particular chapter, something that you wanted to discuss before we start looking at the material that I sent out to you? Anybody? Okay. So we have mentioned these prayers before, but I want to take a few minutes to actually read them with you carefully and get a sense of how these prayers express God's love and how it fits into a structure of reciprocal love. Okay, we talked about, he ends the book, chapter 15, with a reference to Song of Songs, which I'll comment on later on. But he talks about reciprocal love. And I can show you that that's what our prayer book intended for us to come to an understanding of by how it's set up, okay? So, you have before you the morning and evening prayer versions of the second blessing after the Baruch Hu, before Shema Yisrael is recited, okay? In the morning, the first blessing is the blessing over the creation of light. In the evening, it is it's same type of a thing. The movement, the rising and the setting of the sun and the planet, etc. Okay, so there it's more focused because it's the end of the day. So it deals with the sun come up and the sun goes down. In the morning, it's focusing mainly on the creation of light. Okay, all right. And then the second blessing then brings in the notion of the love that God shared with Israel and how that love was shared. Okay, all right. But you see, just the volume of the prayers, the one in the morning is considerably larger than the one in the evening. Okay. And because the morning prayer is a much more primary prayer, the evening Amidah, when it first was developed as the concept of saying the standing prayer after the Shema and its blessings, that was seen as voluntary. It wasn't until sometime in the late rabbinic period, Middle Ages, that it became a fixed element of the worship process. It was voluntary because the morning and late afternoon prayers were seen as conforming to the timing of the animal sacrifices in the temple. after sundown, there's no more sacrificing. What was burnt were things that the extra stuff that needed to be burnt up, before they were disposed. Okay, so it's a secondary level of using the altars, but it's not as sacred as the actual sacrifices. All right, so that's Shacharit and Mincha. So Mariv originally was voluntary, but it became a widely accepted thing to do, especially when you had synagogues developing. And what they would do is, the law evolved that if you say Mincha, the afternoon service, after a certain point in the late afternoon, you can then continue immediately into Mariv, into the evening prayer, even if the sun doesn't go down, like during the summer. Okay? And the whole point was because people were hesitant to stay. First of all, to go home and then come back to shul. Sound familiar, right? They had to, let's say you say Mincha at 2 p.m, which is kosher, right? But then you got to come back at 7 to say Mariv. So what they did was they allowed it to bunch together, and you do both. But secondarily, it meant that for substantial parts of the year, you could actually go home before it was pitch dark. And the Hashkivenu prayer that you say after you finish the Shema and its blessings at night, is a prayer for God's protection at night, because it was scary to go home when it was dark. Okay, so but the point is, but nonetheless, but the Amidah became, the evening Amidah became a fixed element in the prayers later on. Okay, all right. So that's probably why the recitation of Shema, that was that needed to be done twice a day. So again, you plug it in with an Amidah and say it. It formalizes it for the community. And that's what was going on. All right. So we're going to look at these two prayers. All right, Tybal, go ahead.
When you were saying that, and I was thinking about the three patriarchs that line up with the prayer, they're the tradition that the patriarchs line up with prayer. And I started wondering if because I hadn't thought of it in the context of love, whether somehow God's love was different for each patriarch, and whether that mapping, I don't know, it yields anything worth thinking about.
I haven't seen anything that relates. These were seen as expressions of the patriarchs' love of God. Okay? The fact that they prayed to God. And by the way, that's Midrash, obviously, because there's no reference whatsoever in any of those that there actually was a prayer process taking place. Right? They take words that seem to imply that. Midrash can be very loosely connected to the terms of Torah. Okay? But what it was a sense of providing a biblical foundation for the three prayers. That's one of the reasons why that happened, because you got to keep in mind that the notion of a fixed prayer structure, it took generations for that concept to become fixed in the thinking and practice of the Jewish people. Okay, because prior to the destruction of the temple, as far as we know, there was no formal fixed structure that people in synagogues were saying all the time, with the exception of certain prayers in a different context altogether, which I'm not going to go into, but not something on a daily basis. So the concept of synagogue and prayer was a substitute for sacrifices. That was the basic concept there. Okay, but the notion of a fixed prayer, look, it continued into the Middle Ages, where the guys in Babylonia were saying 19 blessings, and the guys in Eretz Yisrael were saying 18 blessings. It began in Eretz Yisrael in the generation after the destruction, when the leader, Rabban Gamliel, said you pray 18 blessings every day. And that was the Amidah. That became the Amidah. Okay, for their own reasons, which are still unclear, the Babylonians made it 19. And they split one of the blessings to make it that way. They split the blessing. Originally, the blessing it was Jerusalem and David. Rebuild Jerusalem and establish the Davidic line. That's how it was originally. They split that into 2. And that changed the number from 18 to 19. And there was a disagreement on that until finally the Babylonian traditions just overwhelmed the traditions of Eretz Yisrael, which is in the Middle Ages. And then finally it disappears. And that's in the Cairo Geniza, in Egypt, the manuscripts that they found manuscripts of the 18 blessings that went down to about 1200. I'm not talking early medieval here. We're talking high Middle Ages. People were still using that text. That's how long it lasted. But eventually it peters out. Okay, all right. Anyway, so yeah, but the reference to the patriarchs was an attempt to give a biblical foundation to something that was a rabbinic overlay. And the rabbis were faced with questions like that into the time of the Karaites in the Middle Ages. Eventually it took hold, but it didn't happen overnight. So that's why one of the reasons why that midrash developed. Okay, all right. Now let's look. Okay, somebody please read with unbounded love.
I'll do it.
Okay.
With unbounded love, you have loved us, Adonai, our God. With great and abundant pity, have you pitied us, our Father, our King, for the sake of our forefathers who trusted in you and whom you taught statutes of life. So too, be gracious to us and teach us, our Father, merciful Father.
Okay, stop. Whoa. Hold on. Teach us, period. Okay? All right. All right. Unbounded love. God loved us. Yes. Pity is chemla. It's compassion as well.
Oh, okay.
All right. But it's close. All right. All right. Now, our Father, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. It's important here that we look at that order. Right? All right. It's not an accident. You see what comes first.
Mm-hmm. The closeness.
Exactly. The Father precedes the King.
Doesn't this also get to mercy and
Yes.
judgment at the same?
Well, it's that same, exactly. The Father sets down rules in the household out of love and care for the children, right? It's pure love. God, as King, sets down rules for the community, if as a king, not as a father, to run society, to maintain an orderly society, right? But God is both. So God does, like a father, give laws to the people out of love, hoping for love in return. And as king, he gives it to create an operational society that will result in the people having respect for him as king, and thanks to him for giving them a safe and good life. Okay, but the Father always comes first. I've said this 100 times when I've taught these prayers. Find me a place anywhere in our sacred literature where God is called Malkeinu Avinu, where the father precedes the brother, where the king precedes the father. You can't. Okay, so that's the point. When you talk about love here, God the Father is the thing you want to talk about first, right? Okay, so our ancestors trusted in you, okay? And you have taught us statutes for life, and so too, be gracious to us and teach us. Okay? Remember, we talked about the whole concept of Torah as grace, right? Which is a gift that was given for no ulterior reason other than an expression of love. And that's what's here. Techanenu is the Hebrew word from the word chen, chanan, chanun, okay, which means gracious, grace, etc. Okay, so it's a gift out of love. Okay, now, Avina, we're going on. Go ahead, continue reading. Okay, you know what? You did such a good job, Jackie. Why don't you continue? But slow down a little.
Sure. Our Father, merciful Father who acts with compassion, have compassion on us. And
stop right there. Okay. Have compassion on us. Notice what it says. Avinu, our Father. Ha'av, harachaman, compassionate Father. Hamarachem, who acts compassionately. Rachem, have compassion for us. Okay? So you have this word, resh chet mem, compassion, 3 times in a row. Boom, boom, boom. You get the point, right? This is Adonai. This is the God of compassion. So Torah is associated here with compassion, something that you also associate with love.
Isn't the root also associated with womb?
Yes, but it's different. I mean, it's the same 3 letters with completely different.
Oh, okay.
You know, it's what we would call them synonyms. No, homonyms. Homonym is 2 words that are the same or similar but have different meanings. Is my right? I think that's homonym.
Red and red is a homonym.
Huh?
Red and red, R-E-D and R-E-A-D.
That's correct.
They sound different meanings.
Right, but here they're the same, the same spelling, but use completely different. Yeah. I mean, again, we've said this a million times. You look in these lexicons today, you find a simple word, and it can have, 8 different meanings, 4 of which are clearly related to what would be the original one, and then 3 others that are just from Mars. It's spelled the same way, but it's a completely different word. So that's the nature of Hebrew, probably many languages like that as well. Okay, but the point here, the message is clear. And this is the point that Held is making, right? Torah is love. Judaism is love. It's compassion. And the point is, it's not just deen. It's not just law. Everything in it is ultimately compassion. Even the law is compassion, because it's compassion and love when you try to protect people from one another when one another gets crazy, right? That's an act of love and compassion for the community, right? And hopefully when you punish, you punish in a way that is, serves its purpose so the person doesn't do it again. But on the other hand, you're not supposed to over-punish to the point where you might kill him when he shouldn't. All right, capital punishment is another discussion. It's there, but that's a different discussion. I don't want to even get over there right now. But the point is, I'll just give you an example of how that operates. In the Torah, it says for certain crimes, you are whipped 40 lashes. That's the punishment, okay? The rabbis come in and say that's a round number. The real number is 39, all right? And the person who administers the whipping has to be a Talmid Chacham, a learned person, preferably a rabbi or a judge. Why? Because 40 already is verging on the capital punishment. 39, they figure it out. Don't ask me how. You can survive 39. It'll be miserable. You'll learn a lesson. But 40 you may not survive. And only a great learned person knows how to administer the lashes so you don't hit too hard so that the 39 actually becomes like a 40. Got to be done in a proper fashion so it doesn't become a killing of the person. So that you can see it's lashing like that is not very compassionate, but you can see the rabbis try to make an effort to temper it as an expression of that compassion. It's all relative, I grant, but this is the point. All right? Okay. So all this compassion. Okay, continue, Jackie.
Have compassion on us and put into our hearts to comprehend and to be intellectually creative, to listen, to learn, and to teach, to preserve, to practice, and to fulfill all the words of instruction in your Torah with love.
Right. To do these things with love. Okay, and notice how broad and how all-inclusive this is being stated. This is an act of intellect, right? Lahavin, lahaskil, right? These are terms that relate to knowing, understanding, thoughtfully, and to listen, to learn, to teach, to observe, to do, to maintain all the words of Torah with love, right? And it covers everything. Okay, everything in any way that you need to allow these messages of Torah to enter into your neshama. Okay, all right, Bert, unmute.
This is not about blind obedience. This is actually about, if you want, chewing on words of Torah and really engaging with them.
Exactly.
Which gets back to the many meanings of the word Shema, which kind of means listen, but there's also an involvement. So right. There's an intellectual involvement here.
It begins with that.
Yeah, right? Well, that was the first thing. Yeah, intellectually creative. I don't know that that's...
Lahavin, no, but it says lahavin or lahaskil. Mm-hmm. That's what the intellectually. The Havana and Haskalah are both intellectual activities,
right? And teaching and practicing, and so it's all encompassing. It's
exactly.
These are the mitzvot. Shut up and do them.
Right.
It's not that.
It's not blind obedience, and it's not obedience out of ignorance.
Yeah.
The ideal is that every Jew should be able to do this. Period. And base their life upon this. Okay, and it's very interesting that it begins with the intellectual component in the Hebrew, lahavin or lahaskil. Okay, the Enlightenment was called Haskalah in Hebrew. The 18th century Enlightenment was called Haskalah. Okay, and of course, when you talk about teaching, it's based on knowledge. So it begins with that. Yes, absolutely. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. Now, somebody else, please now begin. And by the way, again, all of this is supposed to be done ahava, with love, right? Love for the Torah and love for the source of the Torah, God. So already you see there is reciprocity in the process. That's the point. God loved us by giving it to us. We loved back by doing, I say this is what you call doing Torah in the fullness of the meaning, from the intellectual down to the details. All right, in terms of thinking, belief, values, and actions. It has to conclude with actions, right? To practice, to observe, to preserve, and fulfill, right? That's taking it into action. It's not just supposed to be a theoretical, totally intellectual procedure, or even spiritual to the point where it doesn't have any effect on life. All right, and there's this whole, we'll see, in the discussions that we've had, this concept of Torah Lishma. You study it for its own sake, and that's a matter of discussion and debate. Mm-hmm. Because if you say for its own sake means that it means it has to be carried into action, because that's what it mandates, then clearly you can say, I do it for its own sake. It's the sake of it is for me to learn it and to act on it. That's doing Torah for its own sake. Unfortunately, there are people who say, no, it means I just study. That's very selfish, because you're the beneficiary of it. It's for me. And that's not the way it's supposed to be.
I kind of feel like the the Frumis in Israel especially, but it's also here, probably also other countries too, that all they ever do is study. I don't really think they do anything.
Well, it depends.
Study.
Don't make a generalization, okay? Yep, there are those who view that's their life, okay? And they don't hold down a job, right?
That's the ones I'm talking about.
Right, yeah. There are others who study, and they actually become judges within their communities, and they actually adjudicate real life cases that come to them by people in the community. All right, now that's very narrow, you would say, but nonetheless, that's taking it out beyond the four walls of the yeshiva. That's taking it into court. And that means it's being implemented to shape people's lives. And that means all kinds of discussions, not just, so-and-so said this was milchik, and it's not milchik, it's parv, and so I, blah, 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 and I lost money, blah, blah. All right. It also means, so Chaim beat me up, okay? At a certain point, I think in a country like Israel, and even here, certain crimes obviously have to go over to the police, because it's the institutions of the Haredi communities, they don't have jails, right? They don't have formal punishment. They can condemn people to be put in cherem, which means that everybody stops talking to them and stops doing business with them for a prescribed period of time to teach them a lesson. So if somebody cheats somebody, you may not want to call the cops. You may want to handle it internally, and you could. And that person would be punished by people just stop doing business with them for a month, 2 months, whatever. And they learn a lesson and they stop doing it. But anyway, so it varies, right? The whole question that has emerged in Israel right now, especially now, of course, number one is regarding serving in the army. But the other question is that the best place for such people? There may be some who want to because they feel that that's the greatest expression. But the other hand, what they're saying is at least community service of some kind, some parallel to that, whereby they get out of the yeshiva and go and help people in the community who are in need because of a difficult situation.
Don't they drive, though, those years with the horrible terror in Jerusalem?
I didn't hear you. Say it again, please.
Something to say in their support. I want to just say two things to support those people. That I often saw over the years with the terrorism in Israel, that it was the at least the Orthodox, that drove the ambulances and, God forbid, cleaned up those horrible scenes. I mean, I literally saw this. They weren't the hats. But
I know what you're talking. Yeah, exactly.
I give them credit. And the other thing I like about that group, and I'm saddened that they have to serve, only because it just means how awful our situation is over there. But the one thing I'd say in their defense also is that you never hear, yes, they study and that's about it, but you don't hear about them hurting other people. I never hear about those groups going and, murdering and rape. In other words, they're good people. Yes, they don't contribute to the degree we need, but the study is something, the study is something.
Remember, those are people, though, keep in mind.
Yeah.
That were throwing rocks.
Mm-hmm. At who?
At other Jews.
Oh, that's no good. No, that's bad.
And those large numbers, and that was something that was under the control of the leadership. Okay, it was under the control.
I've prayed with women.
Wait, Rachel, wait. Bert's hand was up first.
Oh, no, I see to Rachel. Go ahead. I'll come in.
Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks. Just Women of the Wall has been meeting on Rosh Chodesh at the Wall for more than 30 years. And I have davened with them on several occasions, years and years and years apart from one another. And initially, the Orthodox men on the men's side would throw things at the women on the women's side. And the police initially, years and years and years ago, were protecting the women davening. And then someone new took over as rabbi of the Kotel or the Kotel Plaza, and the police stopped supporting the egalitarian service. And the Orthodox updated their strategy.
Rachel, it wasn't an egalitarian service.
No,
they were on the right. They were on the women's side, and they were only women.
Correct. But the government changed and became much more restrictive.
Right.
And also the ultra-Orthodox mobilized their women. So now men don't throw things. The women come to the women's side and push and shove those of us with talasium and tefillin.
Yeah.
And, this is not something that this is not something that should be happening.
Right.
Period.
Now, let me give you another couple of examples, and we can come back to this, because unfortunately, these are problems in Israel that have gotten worse rather than better. With the permission of the government, the Masorti movement, the conservative movement, opened up a prayer space and had a structure built on the on the other side of the ramp that goes up to the mosques, right? There's an area there which is an archaeological park, and it's public property. And they built a platform at the wall for egalitarian minions. And the government was supposed to make sure that it stayed that way, because the non-egalitarian women were in the women's section, and they had that to themselves. So this was, a considerable ways away, separated, fine. But what happened was, for a considerable amount of time, Haredi men would come in before the Masorti community people got up there on the Shabbos, and would take over and would not allow the others to come in and run their service as they were supposed to do. Eventually, there was enough pressure put on that has changed. Okay, so now Masorti is back up there doing that. But that's part of this whole thing. Final point. Rabbi Perry Netter, who was our associate rabbi, during most of my tenure, was with a group of conservative Jews, Masorti Jews, on Tisha B'Av, who gathered on the plaza, but way back, not in the area near the Kotel, and they got permission, and they observed Tisha B'Av. They were planning to observe this during the day, in the morning, to have Shacharit and read Eicha, and it was a mixed group of men and women. And Haredim came and dumped garbage and stones on them.
Wow.
And recently, nothing. It took a long time until finally a couple of cops came and broke it up. But there was no protection, and it was something that was approved. So this is the problem. There are elements within that community that are extreme. All right, and that's not a good thing. So yes, I agree with you. There are observant Jews, Haredi Jews, who are more open-minded, more committed to serving the community, and they do tough things. Absolutely. I think what's out there now is a hope that group can be expanded considerably, which means giving up yeshiva time to serve the people of Eretz Yisrael. Nobody, I think the people who are clamoring to get him into the army, the notion is because the soldiers put their lives, at risk. That's the greatest sacrifice. But on the other hand, if these people do that with great ambivalence, good. All right, respect that. but they should serve the community and, fill in the gaps that occur because these people are the other guys are in the army. And the army is a problem for a lot of those people because they now have women soldiers. And they're also doing things that allow for non-Orthodox people to have services and so forth. So the army is trying to modernize itself. And the infusion of a large number of Haredi people into that, unless they accepted the fact and just, said, okay, we'll daven over here, you guys daven over there, and leave it like that, okay. But the point is, but at least community service. Okay, all right, Bert. Back to this.
Couple of quick comments. If I'm correct, I think the rabbi said that one of the reasons for the destruction of the second temple was unjustified hatred of Jew against Jew.
Right.
And I don't need to say anything more.
Yeah, of course. That's.
I also don't recall, I could be wrong, that the area outside the wall was supposed to be an Orthodox synagogue.
No.
It was not, okay.
No. It was the opposite. It was supposed to be a Masorti synagogue. That's what I said. It was
I guess what I'm saying is, however you understand the wall, it was not the outside of it was not an Orthodox synagogue.
I understand.
Okay. And finally, just real quickly, that getting back to the prayer we were talking about, I think that Rabbi Held's point much earlier in the book, that love, as he's using it, was a disposition, not just an emotion and not just action, but had to involve both of them.
Yes.
And
right.
I think that was very apt to the contents of this prayer.
Yes, correct. It is.
That's all.
And that's what this is telling us, that we should do all of these things out of love.
Right.
So love is commingled with the study, right, the doing of the act, and the love itself. It's all a holistic expression. And that's exactly what it's supposed to be. Bobby.
I don't know if you want to continue on this theme, so I was going to lower my hand. But when you talk about people throwing rocks, I think it's still a big generalization of a small number of people. And B, though we know it wasn't prevented, we don't know what kind of punishment they may have been subject to after whatever they did in these cases. And C, part of the problem of the southern wall that a lot of people don't know about is Palestinians complained about using that site because it's very close to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And they were complaining it was threatening the Al-Aqsa Mosque when the Netanyahu-Sharansky plan, they were trying to convert it.
Yeah, but they didn't come and stop the Jews from praying.
Yeah, but it's still the people that do are a small minority of people.
It doesn't matter. The point is the police are supposed to protect them. And when the government doesn't do that,
we don't know what they do afterwards. They may punish them afterwards. We don't know. We never see that.
I have heard nothing at all about the nature of punishment that was done. I don't know. I can't answer that. All right?
That's all. We don't know.
All I know I can tell you is when Rabbi Netter was out there, the police came and chased them away. There was no indication that they stopped them. They took their IDs. They just said, get out of here. And they left. Okay, because they felt threatened. But that was it. So I don't think you need to be defensive here, Bobby. There are problems of the extremism within the Haredi community that pose deep problems for the country. It's a reality.
Yeah, I'm just saying, a few people throw a lot of stones and it makes it.
No, but I remember pictures when it wasn't a few people.
Okay.
All right, in Ramot, in the areas where there is a mixed community. I mean, and Haredi people, by the way, broke into and set fire to the conservative synagogue in Ramot, where we have daven, we support that synagogue. They were able to fix it up, and that was a few people, to be sure. But the question is the you need to have the government to be activist in dealing with these things, so it's not repeated. And the fact that these things are repeated means that the government is not doing enough to stop this. And the fact is, right now, you know who's running the government. Come on, unfortunately. And the influence that these people are having right now.
Rabbi, I just want to say I was in Israel in 1972, the summer, worked on a kibbutz called Sorah,
yes.
South African Jews. And I was there for a month and then traveled the country for 2 weeks with my girlfriend, my friend. And we walked right up to the wall. We were wearing our shorts, kibbutz shorts. Walked, again, 1972, things are different, but there was terrorism then too, all over the place. And we walked right up to the wall. I could have stood there all day. I just stayed the amount of time, that I could. I'm not going to stand there all day, but I stood, and it was very nice. That's all I'm going to say. It was very nice.
No question. That's not the issue. Absolutely. And by the way, in 1972, the influence of the extreme Haredi community was not as strong as it is now.
It must be changed.
But it was also the case that they were there. Yeah, I forgot exactly when the Rabbanut actually took over the wall. The notion of the mechitza was always there. No, let me take a step back, and then we'll move off of this. The beginning of the 20th century, there was no synagogue there. There was a wall. And people of any kind could come up there, and daven. This was before it was closed off to the Jews, right? And then when it was opened up again, it wasn't a synagogue. At some point, and I forgot if it was in the 60s or 70s when it was, the Orthodox said, we're in charge of synagogues in this country. We want to declare that the Kotel is a synagogue because it's a place where people come and pray regularly. Therefore, it has to have a mechitza. Now, when you were there, was there a separation?
I don't remember. I'm being honest.
Yeah, I don't know either. Okay. I know I was there in 73, and there was a separate. It was already there.
I don't recall it. I don't recall. Okay. I was given the piece of paper. That's all I remember.
But the point is, the women of the wall were not active either at that time.
Right. No.
So there was no issue, and if you came up with shorts, nobody cared.
That's right.
It was no big. You weren't a threat.
Right.
When you come up there and start reading Torah, putting on tefillin and talis, and you're a woman, that's a threat. That's how they interpreted it. Because women aren't supposed
to. Threat to who?
Huh?
Who are they threatening?
Judaism, I guess they feel.
Yes, that they feel it. It's a sin. It's a sin. Women are not supposed to do that. There's no, by the way, halachically, it's wrong. There's no law that says women may not put on tefillin. It's
right. The V'ahavta does not say men. It says you, not love.
Well, it doesn't say anything, right? But the assumption, come on, you're dealing with thousands of years of assumptions here. It's hard to break.
In 1985, when I was saying Kaddish for my dad, and I generally often or frequently would come in shorts because I was coming off the golf course. And finally, Isaac Zerch came to me privately and said, please don't come in shorts. It's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah, to Beth Am, yeah.
And he was not a Haredi.
Huh?
I know, and he was not a Haredi guy. No, he was an old. No. Right. I mean, I understood that. The point would be.
No, I mean, and I did change. It was a pain in the butt to have to take an extra pair of pants up with me to the golf course so I could change when I got to Beth Am.
But he didn't throw stones.
He didn't throw. He was a wonderful man. I loved Isaac Zerch.
All right. Okay. We got your point. Yes. All right. Let's move on. All right. Who was reading?
Bert.
I can read if you want. If you tell me, is it and enlighten our eyes? Is that what we're?
Yes.
And enlighten our eyes in your Torah, and cause our hearts to hold fast to your commandments, and unify our hearts to love and fear your name, and may we never be put to shame For in your holy, great, and awesome name have we trusted. May we exult and rejoice in your deliverance.
Okay. So unify the hearts. In other words, it means that remember, the tradition understands that there are within us conflicting tendencies, right? And the whole point here would be that this energy, instead of splitting into the tendency to do good things and the tendency to do bad things, that it should all come together in a single energy that does this: love and fear God's name. Okay? Now, fear is part of the equation. He talked about it, Held talked about that. And the whole notion of that is it is not you're scared of God, but, there is an element of that, punishment. Punishment evokes fear. That's a given, right? I mean, I don't want to get a ticket for fear that my car insurance is going to go up, right? It's fear. All right. So there is that element, but in this case, it's more than just that. It is awe of being in the presence of this great power, right? And not fully comprehending it. That's scary. But if you have the love, then you understand that great presence wants to have a relationship with you and will accommodate. And if you believe that the great presence is compassionate, then you can hope that if you did something wrong, that if there is a punishment, that it won't be a horrific punishment. But it takes into account the fact that if you're talking, and we dealt with this a number of times, if you're talking about what's what I'm looking for, control of behavioral management, right? Managing behavior, you have to have boundaries, and you have to enforce the boundaries. Otherwise, the management doesn't work. Okay, so in the big picture, that's what this is part of. All right. So, but then I see your hand. Just a second. Your name. What does that mean? Your name.
Well, I've heard it said as being your essence. That someone's name. It's more the essence of God. Yes. But for me, God, the way we talk about name, kind of like a label, is something human beings use to refer to an object. So to me, God's name has always meant the connection between me and God. That's the connecting part. But I don't think that's the traditional meaning.
No, but the notion, what you said at the beginning is right. It's a sense that if you know a person, if you know the name, it means you're not just, it's not a superficial thing. Because you say the essence. I want to, and all the sources that we have been reading say you really ultimately can't fully know the essence, but you can appreciate what God represents by virtue of the names that are associated with him. So, as I said, Yud He Vav He is compassion. Elohim would be judgment, okay? And all kinds of other variations on the themes. But that gives you by the way, in this notion of the sanctity of the name, though, took on a mythology of its own. Deuteronomy, read Deuteronomy closely. In Deuteronomy, God's presence is not in the tabernacle. God is in heaven. His name is there, but his presence is not. At Sinai, God's presence was not there. It says so. He sent down a fire through which his voice was heard. It was a broadcasting station that he sent down. Okay? And God's name, God heard the people, God's voice came through the fire. But God was never down there. Now, Deuteronomy says that. Leviticus and Exodus and Genesis say otherwise, okay? Deuteronomy is the one that is the most abstract in its definitions of God. It's very, in that sense, very modern. compared to the other ones, which are more anthropomorphic, that speak in much more so. Deuteronomy is not anthropomorphic free, but it's the level of it is much reduced when you compare with the other books in the Torah, just as an example. So, but my point is, the name is a very significant element within a theological conceptualization. All right, Tybal and then Barbara.
Two things, and one is, when you were just saying what you were saying about behavioral management and boundaries because of what's going on in our world, I just was reminded about the universities that aren't enforcing their own rules, which just, I think...
well, it's had a huge pushback now.
Well, but anyway, it's a little late. I mean...
Yeah, but
well, we'll see. Right. We'll see the next academic year, which I think just incites more. That's one. But I wanted then to switch to what you were saying about the name, because to me, it invokes creation, because it was words that name things that did creation, and then the human Adam became the partner with God because the human got to name. I mean, I'm just saying, I think for Judaism, naming has so much more import than religions or cultures with different foundational myths.
Yeah.
Like shaping something out of clay or building out of wood or something. It's just, so there are all these resonances with name.
Yeah. I don't know enough about how other religions deal with the concept. I can't respond to that. But you're right in the sense that the thing with a name is it's abstract. It's not something you can see or touch or feel, right? You hear it, you can read it, but you can't. It's not like, well, what shall we say? Power. All right, power. I can feel power, right? The result of power. So if I say God is powerful, all right, so there's an earthquake that got made. I can feel that. So the results of power I can feel. What's the results of name? It's very abstract, and yet it represents an expression of God.
Rabbi?
I don't know if that's what you're suggesting, but I think if that's with the direction you're moving, I think it's a good thought.
But I also want to say, I believe personally that for example, and I think it might depend on the human being, but the name I was given shaped my life. I mean, it wasn't incidental.
Well, I mean, that's a very private feeling.
No, I thought that was actually a sense of a Jewish tradition, that a name really matters, and the name you give children is aspirational. May not work for 100% of children, but I thought it was a Jewish culture.
Well, if it's aspirational, then it means that you have to raise them in a way. You've got to be cognizant of what the meaning of the name is and work toward that goal. And I don't know the degree that parents actually do that. I don't know.
I mean, maybe the contrast. I can't even believe I know this from popular culture, but wasn't it George Foreman that named like 5 kids George Foreman?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, Barbara's shaking her head, which yes. I just think is appalling.
George 1, George 2, George 3, George 4, and George 5.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Whatever that means. But I don't know how that expressed how he raised them. Now, George Foreman, if I'm not mistaken, was a preacher, wasn't he? Or is? Yeah. So he was a religious guy.
I only know about the grill.
Yeah. All right. Barbara.
Yeah. In this context, doesn't the word name specifically mean God?
Well, Hashem.
One of his names. I mean, like Macomb is the name, and
Hashem. The word Hashem, right?
You're right.
It means the name. Yeah.
Right, but doesn't that word name mean, when you say it that way, it means God? It doesn't mean my name or your name.
It's Hashem. It's the name.
Right.
Right. So Hashem Shalach, what is it? What's your Hebrew name? Bracha?
Batya.
Batya. Okay. All right. So you're Barbara. Okay. So my Hebrew name is Israel. All right. All right. But it's not the name. It's my name. It's your name. But Hashem, it refers to that. It's a substitute for Yud He Vav He and for Adonai.
Right.
Adonai was originally a substitute for trying to pronounce Yud He Vav He. Right. So instead of saying Yud He Vav He, which we're not supposed to pronounce, and we don't know how to pronounce it, Bible scholars use Yahweh, but we don't know if that's correct or not. We don't know. All right. So Adonai became so sanctified that it took on the same force as the original name. And so now you've got to say Hashem, so you don't say Adonai. Right. For the progress was Yud He Vav He, then Adonai, then Adoshem, then Shem. So we're 3 degrees away. This is what and by the way, that's an abuse of a principle in Judaism. There's a concept of siag, right? It's a hedge. So you create a hedge law that is more strict than the clear given law, so you don't violate the clear given law. You got that? It's a hedge to prevent you from getting to the core law and getting into real trouble. All right, it's a valid concept.
Chicken being meat.
What?
Like chicken being meat.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. Because initially chicken was parv like fish. Yes, that's right. All right, but now you have situations where there's a siag to protect the siag. The law has become even more strict, right? So an example of that is bugs in vegetables, okay? So yes, you're supposed to wash vegetables so you get rid of the bugs, right? Because the bugs are treif, right? They're an animal form that's not kosher. I can live with that. So I will wash my lettuce. However, it was discovered that there are bugs that are so small that you cannot see them with the naked eye. So now there are elements within our community saying, well, just washing it is not enough. You got to wash it, and then you got to take a magnifying glass and check it to make sure that there are no tiny bugs. A rabbi friend of mine, I've mentioned his name before, Haredi rabbi, head of the Beit Din here, check my tefillin, the guy that helped us write a Torah at Beth Am, got a beard down to his pupik, brilliant mind. When that whole discussion about kosher lettuce came out about 3-4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, he wrote a letter to the editor of the Jewish Journal, and he said, this is nonsense. Rashi, the great Rashi, says what you can see with your eye, not with your magnifying glass. And that should end the discussion right there. But no, it wasn't satisfactory. They got even worse. They said you can't eat broccoli because it's very dense. And these tiny little bugs get in there and you can't even see with the magnifying glass. Well, if it's that dense, then the bugs that you can see can't get in there either. So suddenly people were saying broccoli is not kosher. It's a siag against the siag against the siag. That's a tendency that exists today that is crazy. And it makes for, people who want to be observant, it makes it hard on them. It makes it more expensive on them. And it makes it seem sort of foolish. So why should I keep kosher? It's a bunch of craziness. And that's what has happened within our communities. I can tell you firsthand. It's sad. Wrong concept. All right, anyway. Okay. And all of that comes out of, the rabbi who knew what he was talking about more than anybody else knew, where you can be lenient. Because there is leniency within Torah. I remember when I was in Israel in 1973, I forgot his name right now, on the Supreme Court of Israel, was a learned Orthodox Talmud, a brilliant, brilliant Jew. If I got up and looked on my shelf, I could find his name for you. He's got 3 volumes on Jewish law. Brilliant mind. Okay. And he was the voice of halakha on the court. And everybody had the greatest respect for this guy. So we met at the conservative yeshiva, what is now the Schechter Institute, behind the museum in Jerusalem. There was a hall there. A bunch of us came to hear him talk about the tendency towards strictness in the Israeli rabbinate. And his main point was leniency is a legitimate halachic concept. Strictness is not necessarily the only answer. And he laced into the rabbinate. He says, if you know the law, you understand that it doesn't have to be no all the time. That's a sign of ignorance, he said. And this is a guy who was a genius and observant. He was an Orthodox Jew, but not crazy. It's like my friend here, who said bugs. Rashi says what you see. So that's a tendency that exists. And I would say that violates the principle here, which is to do it intelligently. The first principle here was, right? We've talked about it before, right? Lahavin, lahaskil. Use your mind and carry that out, carry it through. All right. I didn't expect this was going to take so long. That's okay. All right. Let's finish that up. Okay, Bert, continue. Deliverance. So it says, so we can rejoice in your deliverance. Now,
bring us to peace from the 4 corners of the earth, and lead us upright to our land.
Right.
Because you are the Almighty who performs acts of deliverance, and you've chosen us from among all peoples and tongues, and you have brought us close to your great name forever in truth, that we may give thanks to you and proclaim your oneness with love.
Proclaim your oneness with
love. Blessed are you, Adonai, who chooses his people Israel with love. I note it doesn't say chose, but it says chooses, present tense.
Yeah, Hamavarech. Sorry. Habocher ba'amo Yisrael. It's present tense.
Yeah, the English is definitely present tense.
No, but in the Hebrew also, bocher is present tense. It's hover.
Right. And I just want to the much earlier, what is translated here, I forget. It's not cling to when it talks about the mitzvot and to God. It's debek, right? Earlier.
What are you saying? Which
Hebrew? I'm just saying Hebrew.
Yes.
Here it's translated as hold fast to your commandments. Doesn't it literally mean more like glue ourselves?
Yeah. It's a stick. That's hold fast. That means
I've seen it translated as cleave to.
Yeah, that's right. That's all the same. Yeah, it means debek is glue.
Yeah.
Ledabek, it's a PL form, which means to be stuck to. But it means to cleave to. You can use it in a different way. Glue is gooey. You don't want to use glue. I don't want to stick to gich.
Anyhow, so this
cleave. I want to cleave to God.
Right. So the interesting thing is the sentence before, and again, I don't see it, you have chosen us, past tense, and then it says you continue to choose.
Wait, hold on.
Because you are the Almighty.
Yeah, you chose us from all languages, and you brought us to your name, right?
And blessed are you who, I'm going to say, continues to choose.
Yes, right.
Today, this moment.
Chose, and he continues to choose.
Yes, right. It's not in the
choosing happened in the past, but it wasn't a one-shot deal. It means the choice is still operational.
Yeah,
right? And that's clear. Again, Held doesn't contradict what Held is teaching.
No, not at all. Reminds me of Baruch She'amar and then Baruch Hosev Reshit. Doesn't that mean the past tense and the present tense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
The Noten HaTorah, the blessing we say,
right.
Is that present tense or past tense?
Right, yeah.
Gives, present tense.
Right, okay, but here it's clear, right? Okay. Now, let's look at the other one. This is more brief. All right, so who wants to read? This is now the different thing. The first one, remember, is Ahava Rabbah, with great love, unbounded love. Here it's Ahavat Olam. This is eternal love. It's interesting, right? This is an eternal love, right? And where do we get that concept? Where's that from? We saw it before. Where does that, out of what does that flow? The what between God and Israel?
Covenant.
The covenant, the brit, right? And is that a temporary thing?
No. It's a forever thing.
It's a forever thing. Does God punish us?
Yeah. He has.
But do we stay punished eternally?
No.
No. If we do tshuva and act properly, then the flip side is we get the blessings from, literally. In the Torah, it's literal, right? Curses and bad things will happen to us. The things that God brought on Egypt will hit us. That's what it says in the Torah. But if we recognize and admit our guilt and seek repentance from God and are serious and committed to that, which God can find out very easily, then it shifts the other way and all the blessings return. It's the quid pro quo, right? But the point is that we've established this before, that the covenant is eternal. And that's what this is saying. All right. Now, he chooses us with love, and we love back. All right? Because we proclaim his oneness with love. Very good. All right. Well, before we do the next one, let's stop for a moment. So what's the structure here? Ahava Rabbah tells us God loves us and gave us Torah. Right? God is a parent, and as the child, God wants us to learn Torah, to help us learn Torah, to do for us, be able to do Torah in the fullness of the meaning of Torah. Right? Okay. Now, what do we do immediately after saying this prayer? Forget about the bottom paragraph right now. What do we do?
The Amidah. Well,
no, right after this prayer. Shema follows. So what are we doing? We are proclaiming God's oneness.
Okay.
What does it say right before the blessing in Ahava? Proclaim your oneness with love. So we proclaim God's oneness. So look at the order. God loves us, gave us Torah, and helps us to appreciate the oneness. We proclaim that.
And this is
now, what comes after that?
There's a long prayer.
You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart
and soul.
Oh, right. And these things shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children.
What year was this written, these prayers?
Hold on. Let me just finish the point. I'll get back to that. All right? This is a covenant. God loves us. We're supposed to proclaim God's name. We proclaim God's name, and we're supposed to do it out of love, and that's what it says. Okay, Israelites, love me back. I love you. You proclaim, love me back. Got it? Quid pro quo. I love you. You love me. And what's in the middle? The oneness of God. God proclaims it. We proclaim it. Okay? It's an intentional structure. It's an intentional structure. It's a covenant. So every time you say that, you're affirming the covenant. That's what you should be thinking. That's what this is about. It's a powerful thing. I mean, it's there to remind us of this. And of course, Held's book has made us recognize the fact that it's a great challenge. And that's one thing that we all can take out of the book. Being, what they say in Yiddish is schwerer Yid zu sein. You know what that means? It's hard to be a Jew. Some people say it means because everybody persecutes us. Yeah, possibly. But I think it's the other way around. Covenantal living is a challenging thing. It puts great demands upon you. But the idea is, if you understand the value and the meaning of it, you can appreciate that it can also very much enrich your lives and create a relationship to the world around you that is built on love. I remember there was a member of the shul years ago who was in her 90s, and she was stuck at home. And, she was at a point where she had outlived her husband, and her kids were not living nearby, and she was lonely. So from time to time, I would come to see her. And it was hard for me to do. She was very sedentary. Sometimes in those situations, I find a way to get these people to do some volunteer work so they can do something meaningful. And very often, by the way, it ends up really being a wonderful experience for them. We've had a number of volunteers at the synagogue who are older people, retired, no family, no grandkids around, and this became that gave meaning to their life. But she didn't want to move. In a sense, she was her own worst enemy in this regard. So I said to her, okay, you want to find meaning? Do you like eating peaches? It was the summertime. So she said, yes. I said, so okay. So before you say a peach, say the bracha. Borei pri ha'etz. Baruch atah Adonai u'melech haolam. Borei pri ha'etz. Praise are you, Lord of God, ruler of the universe, who is the creator of the fruit from trees. And bite into that wonderful peach. Make sure you get it at the farmer's market, because the ones in the supermarkets are not so sweet. All right. Bite into it. Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Thank God. Okay? You can find some pleasure. I use that as an example. And she didn't fully get it. She wasn't, she was moving forward in her senility. It was very sad. She passed away about a year later, again in her mid-90s, so you can't fault the Kodesh Baruch Hu for taking her, But it was, in a sense, I would never, kill somebody, but it was a Rahmanas. She was ready.
Brown paper bags.
Huh?
Brown paper bags. That's how you get peaches to ripen.
Oh, thank you.
When they're hard, in the supermarket, you put them in a brown paper bag and close it for a few days. It softens up and it sweetens.
Oh, that's very nice. Now
you leave them out for a few days and they sweeten and get soft.
I know that, but I know that avocados you can put by bananas, and that ripens them. It does. Maybe if I put the peaches by the bananas, they'll ripen. I'll try that. I'll tell Freddie. All right. Anyway, okay. All right. Getting back to this then. So, the point is that the idea here is that if you can somehow discipline yourself to be aware of the values and the concepts that this book has, that's, I think, the beauty of the book really, is that it deals with the wide range of meanings that one can find in the tradition, in the various expressions of the tradition. And of course, he's trying to make the point that these are all supposed to be expressions of love. Again, he's got an ulterior motive, right? Wants to respond to Christian world and say, guys, we are of love also. All right, good, okay. But I think that's the help, the usefulness of the book, if I might say that. All right. So covenant, guys, this is covenant. That's your covenant. Daily covenant in the morning and at night, because now the next one This is what you say at night. Somebody please read the bottom.
I'll read it.
Okay.
With an everlasting love, you love the house of Israel, your people. You taught us Torah and commandments, statutes and laws. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will discuss your statutes and rejoice in the words of your Torah and in your commandments forever. For they are our life and they lengthen our days, and on them we will meditate day and night. May your love never be removed from us. Blessed are you, Adonai, who loves his people, Israel.
Right. Okay. Now, it's interesting. It doesn't specifically say that we love, it doesn't talk about loving back here. That's one of its deficiencies, right? It shows that this is signs of God's love for us. And the past tense of the beginning ends in the present tense, ohev, which means that the love continues. But it's the weakness of this passage is in its brevity that it doesn't, the larger one, the Ahava Rabbah, twice talks about us doing these things out of love, which is the way it should be expressed, that it's reciprocal. The concept of reciprocity is missing. But nonetheless, it still reminds that love is...
It says we rejoice. Is not doing it out of love? Rejoice. It says we rejoice.
We rejoice. Yeah, it's joy. That's good. I'm not saying it's a bad blessing. I'm saying is that it doesn't explicitly state what the other one did, which is important to say, that we are responding out of love. We can rejoice. That's our joy. But it doesn't necessarily reflect upon a reciprocity toward God. We're giving something back to God in the process. That's why the covenant structure, which is here, the concept of the covenant is good. We're giving something back to God, our love. And we are supposed to do it with grace. We do it because of the love, right? That's the point that he's trying to make in this last chapter, right? We do it out of love, not to get mitzvah points. That's the bottom line. Like a parent, right? I love my parents because they were my parents, period. I mean, yes, of course, I did not want to get punished. I was a good boy. I appreciated everything they did for me. Yes. But bottom line is my parents. I love my wife.
Well, we honor our parents. We don't necessarily love our parents.
No.
Most people actually love their parents.
I love my parents.
Obviously, you can't be commanded to love them, so obviously people don't always love them.
Well, we are commanded to love our eternal parent right here. And I would transpose that over to loving your physical parents as well.
But actually, if you see people sometimes...
Wait, hold on. Wait, we're off to... Bert had his hand up.
Oh, well, I was going to respond to Bobby's thing.
All right, Leah, let's just finish with Bobby's point. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay. When a lot of kids have rotten parents that harm them and are nasty to them, and amazingly enough, they love their parent. It's just amazing. I've seen this multiple times. I specifically have one that I know about now. And it just amazes me. Children tend to love their parents no matter how rotten they are to them. And that they therefore will honor their parents. And they'll say their parent is wonderful and they love them. Just amazing. That was all I wanted to say.
Complex thing. And I can't even begin to talk about that. Yeah. All right, Bert.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in context, even though this doesn't mention loving God back, this is immediately followed by the Shema and then V'ahavta. So we're saying God loves us, then we say Shema Yisrael, and then we say V'ahavta, which is our...
Picked up on the other end. Right.
Which is our commitment to love back.
Yes.
All right. It's not... Yeah. In context, both are there kind of surrounding the Shema.
Right, as I said before, the covenant is repeated. I agree. I think it was just nice, though, that the Ahava Rabbah foreshadows that twice and sets the groundwork for what's going to come afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you say it's a redundancy, but I say it's an important redundancy because sometimes, we miss the concept of the reciprocity. And the more emphasis is put on that, I think is important. Barbara.
There's a total aside, but I've been studying with Vered.
Yeah.
And we've studied participles and stuff like that, and I've written them and I've done sentences with them. But this is the first time in the Torah where I've looked, and you mentioned it was the present, and it's rare present tense in the Bible. And I look and see this is a participle which makes it present tense, and I'm very proud of myself. So.
Bravo. But this is not Bible. This is prayer.
Well, but it's still a biblical word.
You're right. No, I understand. Mazel tov.
I just feel good with what I've been learning and stuff.
Good.
I have to call for it when we finish class.
You see, you can be over 80 and still learn. Right.
Yes.
Okay, good for you. All right, Bert, and then Rachel, and then we're going to wrap up. All right, never mind. Rachel.
No, I was applauding for Barbara.
Oh.
It wasn't a raised hand. It was an applause icon.
You're giving her a hand. Let's give Barbara a hand. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Jackie.
And
Vered too.
Wait. Vered too for teaching.
Vered teaches me privately.
Jackie.
When what do you feel this prayer was written? Do you talk about like the 7th century? Or are we talking back to Abraham? When was it written?
Oh, these prayers? Oh, yeah. They evolved.
Gaonic period, right?
First, the earliest prayers that we're aware of.
Yeah.
During the Talmudic period, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century Common Era. Okay. Obviously, the parts from the Torah precede that, right? But this is in the Common Era. We don't know of any full structured prayers. We don't know if there was anything like an Amidah, for example, that existed before the destruction of the Second Temple. All right? And the blessings that we know that the priests were saying in the temple, that was part of their personal prayer. It wasn't an Amidah of 19 or 18 blessings. There was no such thing called Amidah. They had some blessings. You have a sense of the themes of the blessings, which are similar to some of the themes that pop up later. But it's only a couple, 2 or 3, right? And you have the Shema and the 10 Commandments as part of this ritual. So there's a foreshadowing there of surrounding the Shema with blessings, right? And it's using this prayer moment to sort of get to renew, to praise God, in addition to it was like the priests got an extra jolt of spirituality.
So when do you feel the Shema was first uttered, if you had to say, by the people? When was it said?
When did it go public?
When was the Shema that Jews were saying the Shema out loud? Yeah.
That structure?
Well, the prayer itself, when are we talking? When was this
the prayer, hold on. The Shema itself are 3 paragraphs from the Torah that were put together. We know about that already in the Mishnah.
Right.
Around 200 CE. All right. Okay. But we don't know, and we know that there were 18 blessings. The blessings that surround the Shema, we don't know about it that early. Okay, so they developed sometime later. We don't know the exact wording of the blessings of the Amidah. Those emerge when the Talmuds are written, 100 years later. And even there, it's just, headings. The full content of it, we don't know. The earliest forms of these things were found. You see there's a book, a small tractate in the Talmud. It's not really incorporated in the full Talmud. Masechet Sofrim, which is 6th, 7th century CE. There you have more fully expressed prayers By then, some of the stuff is already there, but not the whole thing. Okay? It's in the Middle Ages, later on, that the fuller texts begin to emerge. And we have now manuscripts from that period, and we have more fully developed by the 9th century. We have some responsa by great sages to questions about prayer, and you can see even more of it there, and you get a sense. But even there, it's not fully complete. Okay, by the time you get to the 1100, 1200, you're beginning to see more complete prayers. Okay, and these things are what we have now basically are in existence by then. So it's at some point during the course of the Talmudic into the medieval period that these structures are being created. Okay? All right, Bert.
Just quickly, at least it's my understanding, while the 3 paragraphs of the Shema are part of our liturgy, they're not addressed to God. And so in that sense, they're not prayers like Amidah.
For us.
They're addressed to us, not to God.
Exactly, yes. But but when you take scripture and surround it with blessings, you're making it into liturgy.
Right, no, it is liturgy. I'm saying it is liturgy. Yes, absolutely.
Right. No, it's for us, of course.
But not prayer in the sense of talking.
Well, no, it becomes prayer. So that's why, for example, the Shulchan Aruch, which is our 16th century, but the Shulchan Aruch says when you say the Shema, you have to say it in a certain way, right? You have to hear it. It's really a low, vocalized Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and you're supposed to say all 3 paragraphs at something like that pace. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha, and really focus on the words. Because that it's Kabbalistic in a sense. Because the Amidah, you don't have to do it like that. The Amidah is to be whispered. That's the Amidah, right? Because that's like Hannah, Samuel's mother. That's how she said it, how she prayed. And that's the paradigm. Okay, anyway. And that's why it's a quiet prayer. But everybody should be saying the Shema to themselves in a quiet voice. So you can not only say it, but hear it. Again, the Zohar, Kabbalah is very insistent on the meaning of every letter, every vocalization, every accent, because there's mysterious energy in all of that. Okay, but it does force you to slow down and to meditate on it. And that all across the board, Rambam, the great intellect, Kabbalah agree. Without meditative process, prayers are weakened. You've got to be able to go into them. Okay? All right. So I got Miriam, and that's it. Mariam.
That's okay. Miriam is my Hebrew name.
I know.
So I would take it one step further and say that the slowing down process allows us to, if you will, get into the body-mind. The fact that when we slow down, it can go into the heart, it can go into the guts, it can go into the soul, it can move, it can be there and not just be an intellectual exercise. No. It's not just the hearing and the speaking and the seeing. It's getting it below the neck. That is really important. And that's the piece that the slowing down and the Kabbalists and all that get into the oneness of it all that way.
Well, it says, as we said here, to unify our hearts, right?
Right, exactly. All of that. And now, of course, I've said this before. Neurologically, they know now that there's a nerve that connects the stomach, the heart, and the brain, and then it goes in all directions. So we now know of the heart brain and the gut brain, and that this is proven, and to me it's a miracle. Oops, sorry. To me it's a miracle that that happened.
Yeah. Well, I think, look, there is a very often the what we would say non-scientific approach to things. Beneath it, if the people who are the advocates of these things are very astute observers of how things work, even though there's no scientific evidence for these things, sometimes they come up with insights that later on, centuries later, are corroborated by actual scientific research. So the whole notion of meditation, more and more you hear people saying that, in fact, if you meditate, if you can do that type of a thing, it's like physical exercise, right? Physical exercise for people my age, our age, is a good thing because it keeps the body functioning. You can continue with more life by doing that. And it's scientifically proven. Okay. So I think what she was saying is that the meditative element as a quieting down and a reducing of stress, anxiety, all that stuff, I'm trying to be more technical now, is good for us. Meditation actually, and so in a sense, the absorption of spirituality coincides with a reduction in feelings that can be harmful to us. And I think more and more that's being demonstrated. So I'm not a big meditator, but I find myself, I don't know about you, but when I like reading this material, and especially looking up the sources and studying them, that gives me a sense. I'm totally engaged in it. I'm sure you have that same experience with things that you read that are meaningful and important to you. But to me, it's a total engagement, and it really calms things down. Okay.
I feel that way about Shabbat services.
Yeah, I do too. Yes, exactly. I mean, Shabbat, the whole concept of Shabbat for me, I mean, literally, even when I was on the Bima, and, when you run a service, and you got a full service and you got a bar mitzvah and anniversaries, and you say the prayer for the sick people, and you got to make sure all these things are dealt with, and that you don't get out at 5:00 in the afternoon, right? I mean, all these things are in your mind as a rabbi when you're running the show, so to speak. But at the same time, I felt the necessity when I was davening to daven to myself. When I said the Amidah, when I said the Shema, I did not rush through it. I used that as an opportunity to me, that's what Shabbos was all about. The same thing. All right. Next week, we conclude. I will send you nothing. I'll send you a memo. We're going to read the conclusion of the book. And thank you. Okay, very good. I like that. Thank you. All right. Anyway, that read the conclusion, and again, we may have a shorter session. That's fine. But if you want to make some sweeping judgments about the book, if you want to, talk about what really you gained from it, right? If you want to be critical of it, that's fine. I mean, I don't want to, when I teach, I have to impart information. But as you see from our discussions, you get a lot of information back from you guys as well, which is why I love this experience for me.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.